No one at all, the truth that awakens you. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast, Birth and Death. A meaningful practice is to ask yourself, why was I born? Morning, noon, evening, and night. Ask yourself this question every day. Birth and death are one and the same. You cannot have one without the other. People weep and mourn when someone dies and rejoice with laughter when a child is born. How deluded and humorous this is. If you must cry, cry when someone is born. Cry for the cause, cry for the root, because if there were no birth, there would be no death. Is it truly so comfortable inside a womb? It's not pleasant at all. Think about it. Even staying in a small hut for just one day can be unbearable. Lock all the doors and you'll already experience discomfort. My goodness, and yet you were inside someone's womb for 9 months. Do you wish to be born again? Surely you know that being in the womb isn't pleasant, so why would you want to crawl back into such a dark place? Don't put your head into the noose again. Why are we born? We are born so we don't have to be born again. If you don't understand death, this life will be full of troubles. The Buddha taught Ananda to contemplate impermanence and reflect on death with every breath. We must understand death. We die to live. What does this mean? Death is the end of all doubts, all problems, and living fully in the present moment. It's not about dying tomorrow. We must die right now. Can you do this? If you can, then there will be no more problems, and peace and serenity will come to you. Death is close to us, right within our breath. If you train and practice properly, you will not fear illness or grieve over the death of a loved one. When you are hospitalized for treatment, remind yourself, getting better is good, but not recovering is also fine. If a doctor tells me I have cancer and will die in a few months, I would remind the doctor, be careful, death is coming for you too. The only difference is who goes first and who goes after. Doctors cannot treat or prevent death. Only the Buddha can do this. So why hesitate to use the Buddha's medicine? If you fear illness and death, reflect on where they come from. Where do they originate? They come from birth. Therefore, do not grieve when someone dies. Their suffering in this life has ended, and death is natural. If you want to feel sorrow, feel it when someone is born. Poor soul, they've come back again. They are about to suffer and die again. The wise are keenly aware that all phenomena in the world are without inherent substance. Thus, the wise are neither joyful nor sorrowful, as they are not swept away by the ever-changing phenomena of the world. Becoming happy is birth. Becoming sad is death. Dying leads to rebirth, and being born leads to dying again. Living and dying in every moment is the endless cycle of birth and death. The body. If this body could talk, it would constantly tell us, "You are not my owner. Don't you know that?" In truth, it is speaking to us, but it uses the language of the Dharma, which we do not understand. Nothing in this world depends on us. Everything follows its natural course. This body has its own way of functioning, and we cannot interfere. We might make this body a bit more beautiful, more attractive, and cleaner for a while, like women who grow long nails, wear pink lipstick, and create a charming appearance. But when old age arrives, everyone is the same. The body follows its path, beyond our control. The only thing we can truly beautify is our soul. If this body truly belonged to us, it would obey our commands. When we say, "Don't grow old," or "I forbid you to feel pain," does it listen to us? No, it pays no attention to our wishes. We are merely tenants, not the owners of this house. If we believe this body belongs to us, we will suffer greatly when we must part from it. In truth, there is no permanent self, no fixed or enduring entity that we can cling to. The breath. From the moment you first open your eyes at birth until you leave this world, if you have never once been aware of the in and out breath in your body, you have lived disconnected from yourself. Time is the breath we take in the present moment. Do you say that you are too busy and don't have time to meditate? Do you have time to breathe? Meditation is your breath. Why do you have time to breathe but not time to meditate? Breath is the essence of life. If you realize that the Dharma is the essence of life, you will understand that breath and the practice of the Dharma are equally important. The Dharma. What is the Dharma? There is nothing that is not the Dharma. What does the Dharma teach us? The Dharma teaches us how to live. It uses many ways to teach us, through rocks, through trees, and through what lies directly before our eyes. Therefore, keep your mind calm and quiet to learn how to see and observe. You will see that the entire Dharma reveals itself here and now. Where else must you search, and when else must you wait? First, use contemplation to find the Dharma. Once you begin to understand the Dharma, start practicing it. Through practice, you will gradually see the Dharma. Once you truly see the Dharma, you and the Dharma become one, and you will experience the joy of the Buddhas. Seek the Dharma within your own mind to discern what is right, what is wrong, what is balanced, and what is unbalanced. There is only one true wonder, and that is the wonder of the Dharma. All other wonders are merely tricks that lead us away from reality, away from the interconnections of human life, of birth and death, and of liberation. Turn all your actions into the Dharma. If something feels off, look within yourself. If you know it is wrong and continue doing it, that is defilement. It is rare to find someone who truly listens to the Dharma, rarer still to find someone who remembers and practices the Dharma, and even rarer to find someone who grasps the Dharma and truly sees it. With mindfulness, we see that everything is the Dharma. Observing animals fleeing from danger, we realize they are just like us. They flee from suffering and seek happiness. Animals fear pain and death, just as we do. With a perspective rooted in truth, we see no difference between animals and humans. We are companions in the journey of birth, aging, sickness, and death. The practice of the Dharma culminates in a place where there is nothing, where there is letting go, emptiness, and the burdens have been laid down, unbound by time or space. This is the end. The Dharma is not some distant, faraway thing in the heavens or where celestial beings dwell. The Dharma is here, connected to us and to what we are doing in the present moment. The Buddha wanted us to engage with the Dharma, but we only engage with words, books, and scriptures. This is engaging with the shadow of the Dharma, not the true Dharma taught by the Buddha. If this is all we do, how can we call it genuine and proper practice? People have strayed far away. Observe yourself, sometimes joyful and happy, sometimes despondent and suffering, sometimes comfortable, sometimes weary and listless. All of this is the Dharma. Have you seen the Dharma yet? To understand this Dharma, you must observe and read the experiences of your own life. When listening to the Dharma, open your heart and stay centered. Do not try to accumulate or store in your memory everything you hear. Let the Dharma flow freely in your heart and reveal itself naturally. Let the Dharma flow through each present moment. Whatever is ready to be retained will naturally stay without your intervention. When expressing the Dharma, do not force yourself. The Dharma will flow naturally, adapting to circumstances and fitting the present moment. Each person has different levels of understanding and capacity for absorption. When you align with the right level, the Dharma will pour forth. The Buddha understood the varying aptitudes of individuals. He taught using natural methods, not through supernatural powers, but through his sensitivity to the spiritual needs of those who came to him. He taught according to their needs. Mind and intellect. There is only one book worth reading, and that is your own mind. The Buddha teaches us to discard everything that causes our mind suffering during meditation. It is defilements that suffer, not the mind. We don't know what the mind is or what defilements are. We avoid what does not satisfy us. Our lives are not inherently miserable. Misery lies in dissatisfaction, in not being content with life. Indeed, it is only defilements that cause misery. The world is ablaze with flames. In this scorching heat, the mind swings from love to hate. Knowing how to calm and quiet the mind brings great benefit to the world. If your mind is at peace and happy, you will find peace and happiness anywhere. When wisdom blooms in your mind, every place you look is the truth. Truth is everywhere, just as once you know how to read, you can read anything, anywhere. If you feel dissatisfied in one place, you will feel dissatisfied everywhere. No external place causes your discomfort. The place of discomfort lies within you. Look into your mind. A person carrying a heavy load doesn't notice it much, but those observing from the outside see the burden. Let go of everything. Abandon all attachments, and you will feel light and free. The mind is naturally calm and tranquil. When the mind leaves its calm state, restlessness and confusion rush in. When you observe this restlessness, calm and tranquility return. Buddhism is the practice of the mind. That's all. Those who cultivate their minds are the ones who practice Buddhism. When the light is dim, you cannot see the cobwebs in the corner of the room, but when the light is bright, you can clearly see them to sweep them away. Similarly, when the mind is clear, you can clearly see defilements and remove them. Training the mind is not like training the body. To strengthen the body, you must exercise it. But to strengthen the mind, you must keep it still. Because people fail to see themselves, they do all kinds of wrongs. They do not look into their own minds. Before committing a wrongdoing, they glance around to see if anyone is watching. Is my mother watching? Is my husband watching? Is my wife watching? Are my children watching? If no one sees them, they rush to act. In doing so, they disgrace themselves. They forget that they are always watching themselves. Listen to the Dharma with your mind, not just your ears. Fighting defilements is an internal battle. Using bombs and guns to fight is external warfare. Conquering others is the way of the world. Conquering oneself is the way of the Dharma. We do not fight against others, but against ourselves, persevering in overcoming our inner emotional turbulence. Where does rainwater come from? It comes from dirty water on the ground that evaporates and transforms. How extraordinary! Similarly, your mind can transform defilements if you allow it to do so. The Buddha teaches us to judge ourselves, not others, regardless of whether they are good or bad. The Buddha simply points to the path and says, "This is the truth." Is your mind aligned with that truth? Impermanence. Everything in the world exists through change. You cannot resist or stop it. Think about it. Can you inhale without exhaling? Does it feel comfortable to do so? Or what about exhaling without inhaling? We don't want things to change, yet everything constantly changes. If you know that everything changes, what is there to worry or wonder about? Whatever happens, just remind yourself, another change. That's all. Words that overlook impermanence are not the words of a wise person. If you see change clearly, you will also see the unchanging. The unchanging here is this: things cannot not change. If you understand that only change itself is unchanging, you will understand the Buddha, and you can pay homage to him in a proper way. If your mind tells you that you have attained the first stage of sainthood, go and pay respect to someone who has. They will tell you that nothing is permanent. If you meet someone at the second stage of sainthood, pay respect to them. They will tell you that nothing is certain. If you meet someone at the third stage, pay respect to them. They will say the same: nothing is permanent. If you meet someone at the fourth stage of sainthood, pay respect to them. They will tell you that all is completely impermanent. You will hear from all these saints, everything is impermanent. Don't cling to anything. Sometimes I visit ancient temples and stupas. Some are in ruins. A friend of mine might lament, "What a pity." I reply, if there were no ruins, there would be no Buddha, no Dharma. These ruins are perfectly in line with the Buddha's teachings. Everything in the world follows its natural course. No science can stop it. You can visit a dentist to care for your teeth, but no matter how well the dentist looks after them, eventually they will follow their natural path. Even the dentist will lose their teeth. In the end, everything disintegrates. What is truly certain or lasting? Nothing, except suffering. Suffering comes and goes. Happiness takes the place of suffering, and then suffering returns. This cycle continues endlessly. Apart from this, there is nothing else. Yet we are like wanderers, endlessly chasing and clinging to sensual pleasures. These pleasures are not real. They are only changes in disguise. Karma. Those who do not understand the Dharma when committing wrongdoing often look around to see if anyone is watching. But our karma is always watching us. There is no escaping the consequences of karma. Good actions bring good results. Bad actions bring bad results. Do not rely on gods, deities, or unseen forces to protect you, nor should you believe in auspicious or inauspicious days. These are not real. You will keep waiting for a good day, a good hour, a good month, or a good year, or for this god or that saint. Believing in such things only leads to suffering. Instead, observe your actions and words. Look at your karma. Do good and you will reap happiness. Do evil and you will bear suffering. Practicing correctly can dissipate old karma. Everything comes and goes, arises and ceases. Be aware and let them follow their natural course. Just like two trees, if you nourish and water one while neglecting the other, you won't be surprised to see one tree flourish and the other wither. Some of you have traveled thousands of miles from Europe, America, or distant lands to come to Papong Monastery to learn the Dharma. You endured many hardships to get here. Meanwhile, there are those who live just beyond the monastery wall and never set foot inside its gate. Consider how much good karma you must have to be here. When you do something wrong, you cannot escape it. Even if no one else sees you, you see yourself. Even if you hide in the deepest hole, you will still see yourself there. There is no way to escape the karma you have created. Similarly, why do you fail to see your own defilements? You see everything: calmness, agitation, liberation, defilements. You see it all within yourself. Meditation. Begin meditating now. Stop wandering around waiting to meet a future Buddha. You've wandered enough already. I've heard people complain, "Oh, this year has been terrible for me." Why? I've been sick all year and couldn't meditate. Oh, if they don't meditate when death is near, when will they meditate? If they feel well, do you think they'll meditate? No, they'll get lost in happiness. If they're suffering, they still won't meditate. They'll get lost in their suffering. I wonder when they'll realize that they need to meditate. I've set the schedule and rules for the meditation center. There's no need to change them. Anyone wanting to change them didn't come here with the intention to meditate. Such a person can't expect to understand anything, even if they sleep beside me. Even if they slept beside the Buddha, they wouldn't see him if they didn't meditate. Don't think that just sitting with your eyes closed is meditation. If you think so, quickly change that mindset. Consistent meditation means maintaining mindfulness at all times, whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down. After a meditation session, don't think you've finished meditating. Know that it's merely a change of posture. If you can practice this, you will find true peace. Wherever you are, always live in meditation. Always keep your mind mindful. Even if my blood dries and my flesh decays, leaving only skin and bones, I will not leave this place until I attain the path. Reading this scripture, you might think you must make an immense effort like the Buddha. But you forget that your vehicle is much smaller than the Buddha's. With such a small vehicle, how can you carry everything at once? The Buddha's path is one thing, your path is another. I traveled everywhere looking for a place to meditate, not realizing that it was already within me, in my own mind. Meditation is within you. Birth, aging, sickness, and death are all within you, not elsewhere. I wandered until I was utterly exhausted, only to stop and realize that what I was seeking was right within me. Meditation is not for reaching heaven, but for ending suffering. Do not cling to images or lights during meditation. Do not rise and fall with them. Is seeing light during meditation such a great thing? My flashlight also has light. Lights or images in the mind during meditation won't help us end defilements. Without meditation, you're no different from someone blind and deaf. Seeing the Dharma isn't easy. You must meditate to see what you've never seen before. You weren't born a teacher. You had to study and be a student first. You can only know the sourness of a lemon when you taste it. When a thought arises during meditation, say, "This is not my concern." When you feel lazy, that's when you must meditate. Don't meditate only when you feel energized or comfortable. That's not practicing the Buddha's teaching. We only meditate when we feel comfortable. But where can comfort be found? You want to cut off craving, yet you practice according to craving. Always observe yourself in everything you do. Just reading books won't lead to anything. Days go by, but we fail to see ourselves. A true meditator is one who makes a real effort to know. There are many ways to meditate, but they all come back to this. Let everything follow its natural course. Step out of the battlefield and into a place of cool peace. Why not try it? Do you dare? Merely thinking about meditating without actually doing it is like chasing shadows, abandoning the real for the illusory. When I first meditated for a few years, I still lacked confidence. After gaining more experience, I learned to trust my mind. When you achieve this understanding, whatever happens, you can let it follow its natural course. Things simply come and go. You will reach a point where your mind knows what to do. Clinging to calmness is worse than being restless, because at least with restlessness, you want to escape it. With calmness, you're satisfied and stop progressing. If your mind becomes peaceful during meditation, remain indifferent and continue practicing without clinging to it. Meditation is observing the mind and its feelings. It's not about chasing or fighting anything. The breath continues as you work. Nature takes care of nature's matters. Our job is to strive for mindfulness, looking inward to be clearly aware. That is meditation. Without proper meditation, the mind will wander and become restless. A restless mind is as good as dead. Ask yourself if you'll have time to meditate when you're dying. Always ask yourself, when will I die? By practicing this way, your mind will remain awake at all times, mindfulness will always be present, and wisdom will arise, seeing things as they truly are. Mindfulness watches over the mind, keeping it aware of arising feelings at all times, day and night. With mindfulness comes peace, calm, and self-control. The first essential of meditation is honesty and seriousness. The second is caution to avoid wrong actions. The third is having few desires and knowing contentment. If you practice contentment in words and actions, you will see yourself. The mind will no longer wander aimlessly and will have a foundation of virtue, concentration, and wisdom. At first you rush forward, rush back, and then rush to stop. You keep meditating until you reach a point where going forward isn't right, going backward isn't right, and stopping isn't right either. That's the end. There's no stopping, no going, no returning. That's the end. Right there, you will see that there is nothing at all. Remember, meditation is not about achieving something or eliminating something. You don't meditate with craving, but with letting go. If you want something, you've already stepped out of meditation. The essence of the path is simple. There's no need for lengthy explanations. Abandon love and hate and let things follow their natural course. This is what I practice in my training. Asking incorrect questions shows lingering doubt. Meditation is fruitful only when it aids your observation. But seeing the truth depends entirely on your practice. Practice is about learning to let go, not about increasing attachment. Enlightenment comes when you end craving. If you have enough time to be mindful, you have enough time to meditate. If strange experiences arise during meditation, should I examine them or just acknowledge their arising and passing? Seeing someone walk past, if they're a stranger, you might wonder, who is that? Where are they going? What are they doing? But if they're familiar, you simply acknowledge their passing and let it be. Desire during meditation can be your friend or your enemy. If it's your friend, it motivates you to meditate, to understand, and to end suffering. If it's your enemy, it makes you long for what hasn't happened or wish for things that aren't there. Ultimately, we must let go of all desires, even the desire for enlightenment, to find liberation. Is it necessary to report progress to a teacher daily? Observe your mind and report to yourself. A monk may feel anger or desire today. Does he need to ask me about this? Our body is a collection of the 4 elements. We use conventions to describe things, but we become attached to them, thinking they are real. Take names, for example. Imagine we reverse the names of men and women. What would be different? Yet now we're attached to these conventions, leading to conflicts over gender and other matters. Meditation is seeing through these illusions to reach the unconditional peace where there is no conflict or hatred. Many become monks out of faith, but later trample on the Buddha's teachings. They gain extensive knowledge but refuse to practice. Truly, very few genuinely practice today. Theory and practice. The former is knowing the name of the medicine, and the latter is seeking it out and taking it. Sounds. You enjoy the song of birds but dislike the noise of cars. You fear crowds and noise, desiring solitude in the forest. Let go of the noise and tend to the child. The child, here is your practice. A novice once asked how beginners should meditate, the same way as experienced meditators. Novice, how do experienced meditators meditate? The same as beginners. People say the Buddha's teachings are true, but hard to apply in society. For example, they say, I'm still young, so I have no time to meditate. I'll meditate when I'm older. Would you say, I'm young, so I won't eat. I'll eat when I'm old? If someone gave you a burning coal, you'd jump immediately, wouldn't you? The same urgency applies to meditation. Morality, concentration, and wisdom are the foundation of Buddhist practice. Morality keeps speech and actions pure. The body houses the mind, so practice must encompass morality, concentration, and wisdom. They are like 3 parts of a single piece of wood, inseparable, working harmoniously together. Non-self 93. An elderly devout woman traveled from a neighboring province to visit Wat Ba Pong. She told Ajahn Chah she could only stay briefly because she had to return home to look after her great-grandchildren. She also asked Ajahn Chah to give her a short teaching since she was very old. Ajahn Chah replied, "Listen carefully, old lady. There's no one here. That's all. There's no owner, no one old, no one young, no one good, no one bad, no one strong, no one weak. That's it. Just that. Everything is empty, only various elements of nature interacting. No one is born and no one dies. Anyone who talks about death speaks like a child who doesn't understand anything. In the language of the mind, the language of the Dharma, there is no such thing." 94. The foundation of the Buddha's teachings is the understanding that the self is empty. Yet people studying the Dharma create the idea of self, and thus they resist suffering and difficulty. They want everything to be easy and comfortable. They want to end suffering, but as long as they cling to the self, how can suffering end? 95. Once you understand, everything becomes easy, simple, and direct. When pleasant things arise, know they are empty and not yours. When unpleasant things arise, know they are empty and not yours. Then they disappear immediately. Don't identify with them or claim ownership of them. If you think this papaya tree is yours, how much suffering will you endure when someone cuts it down? When you understand this, your mind will find balance. When the mind achieves balance, it is the right path, the true teaching of the Buddha that leads to liberation. 93. People refuse to study what lies beyond good and bad. They often say, "I will be this, I will be that," but they never say, "I will be nothing," because there is truly no self. That is what they need to learn, yet they avoid it. 94. When you understand non-self, the burdens of life will be laid down, and you will find peace with everything. Letting go of the self and clinging to happiness leads to true happiness. Practice letting go naturally, without struggle. Simply let things be as they are. No grasping, no clinging, just freedom and liberation. 95. The body is composed of the four elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. When these elements come together to form the body, we call it man or woman, give it a name to identify it, but in truth, there is no one there, only earth, water, wind, and fire. Do not become overly attached or agitated by the body. If you truly look within, you will see there is no one there. Peace 99. Q. What is peace? A. What is chaos? Peace is the absence of chaos. 100. Peace is within us. It resides in the same place as unrest and suffering. You cannot find peace in the depths of a forest or on the peaks of a mountain, nor can you find it in a revered and loving teacher. Where there is suffering, there is a path to liberation. 101. Do everything with a mind of letting go. Do not expect rewards or praise. Letting go a little brings a little peace. Letting go a lot brings a lot of peace. Letting go completely brings complete peace, and the struggle with the world comes to an end. 102. In truth, nothing belongs to anyone. Whatever we are is merely an external shell. Strip away this shell, and there is nothing but universal characteristics: birth in the beginning, change in the middle, and cessation at the end. That is all there is. When you see things this way, there are no more problems, and you will find contentment and peace. 103. Recognize what is good and what is bad, whether you are traveling or settled in one place. You cannot find peace on a high mountain, in a deep forest, or in a cave. Even traveling to the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment will not bring you closer to the truth. 99. Seeking things outside yourself is merely an act of comparison and distinction. You cannot find happiness this way, nor can you find happiness by searching for a perfect person or teacher. The Buddha taught us to seek the Dharma, to seek the truth, not to seek individuals. 100. Anyone can build a house of bricks or wood, but that is not truly our home. It belongs to the world and is subject to the laws of the world. True peace lies in inner tranquility, which is our real home. 101. Is the forest a place of peace? Then why hold tightly to what entangles you? Let nature teach you. Listen to the bird song, then let it go. Understand nature, and you will understand the Dharma. Understand the Dharma, and you will understand nature. 102. Searching for external peace is like looking for a turtle with a mustache. You will never find it. But when your mind is ready, peace will find you. 103. Morality, concentration, and wisdom form the path, but the path is not the ultimate truth. It is not the goal. The path is merely a way to reach the goal. For instance, if you want to travel from Bangkok to Wat Pah Monastery, the road is essential for the journey, but the monastery is your destination, not the road. Similarly, morality, concentration, and wisdom lie outside the ultimate truth of the Buddha, but they lead to it. By developing morality, concentration, and wisdom, you will experience the most extraordinary peace. Suffering. There are two types of suffering: suffering that leads to more suffering, and suffering that leads to the end of suffering. The first type is clinging to what you like and rejecting what you dislike. The second type is the courage and perseverance to observe the constant changes in feelings: happiness, sadness, pleasure, displeasure, contentment, dissatisfaction. This type of suffering leads to peace. We often seek an easy path, but without suffering, there is no wisdom. To ripen wisdom, you must fall, cry, and struggle many times during meditation. We become monks or nuns not for good food, restful sleep, or comfort, but to understand suffering, how to accept suffering, how to be free from suffering, how to prevent suffering from arising. So do not engage in actions that cause suffering, such as clinging to attachments. Otherwise, suffering will never let you go. In reality, happiness is just a subtle form of suffering. Clinging to happiness is no different from clinging to suffering. You just don't see it. Do not think holding on to happiness will distance you from suffering. They are inseparable. The Buddha taught that suffering is the inevitable heir of happiness. View both happiness and suffering as equal. When happiness arises, do not be overly joyous and carried away. When suffering comes, do not despair and drown in it. When suffering arises, recognize that no one is truly enduring it. If you believe suffering and happiness belong to you, you will never find peace. Those who suffer gain wisdom through their suffering. Without suffering, they would not reflect and gain insight. Without wisdom, there is no understanding. Without understanding, there is no escape from suffering. That's it. Therefore, one must strive and persist in meditation. When you look back at the world, it will no longer frighten you as it once did. The Buddha attained enlightenment in this world, not apart from it. Both indulgence and asceticism are paths the Buddha did not encourage. They are merely forms of happiness and suffering. We think we escape suffering, but in reality we cling to happiness. If we cling to happiness, we end up suffering again. This is the truth, though people often think otherwise. People escape one place of suffering only to run to another. When suffering arises in the new place, they run again. They think they are escaping suffering, but they are not. They carry suffering with them wherever they go without realizing it. Without understanding suffering, they will not understand its cause. Without understanding the cause, they cannot understand how to end suffering. Thus, there is no way to escape it. Students today have more knowledge than students of the past. They live in comfort and have everything they need. Yet, they suffer more and are more troubled than before. Why is that? Don't aim to be a bodhisattva. Don't aim to be an arahant. Don't aim to be anything at all. If you are a bodhisattva, you will suffer. If you are an arahant, you will suffer. If you are anything, you will suffer. When sitting, just sit. When walking, just walk. That's it. Both love and hatred cause suffering because they arise from craving. Wanting is suffering. Wanting and not obtaining is also suffering. Even when you get what you want, suffering arises from the fear of losing it. How can you live happily with a mind full of fear? When you feel anger, do you see it as good or bad? If you see it as bad, why hold on to it instead of letting it go? You consider yourself wise and intelligent, so why cling to such a burden? Anger can make an entire household quarrel and cause you to cry all night. Even afterward, resentment and suffering linger. If you see the suffering anger brings, let it go. If you don't, it will cause you endless suffering. This is the nature of the world. If you understand it, you can resolve all your difficulties. A woman once asked how to deal with anger. I asked her, when anger arises, whose anger is it? She replied that it was hers. If the anger is truly yours, can you command it to leave? Anger does not obey her. Clinging to anger as if it were your possession only brings suffering. If anger were truly yours, it would follow your commands. If it doesn't, it isn't yours. Anger deceives you. Don't follow it. Whether your mind is happy or sad, don't follow it. It is always deceptive. Clinging to impermanent things as if they were permanent brings nothing but suffering. The Buddha is always present to teach us. Look within yourself to find him. There is happiness and unhappiness, joy and suffering. They are always present. Understanding the nature of joy and suffering is seeing the Dharma, seeing the Buddha. The Dharma is not separate from the reality of this world. On close observation, happiness and suffering are alike. Heat and cold are the same. You can die from being burned by fire or frozen by cold. They are no different. Happiness and suffering are also the same. Everyone seeks happiness. No one wants suffering. Nirvana is free from desire. Nirvana is only peace and tranquility. The teacher friend, you are your own teacher. Searching for a teacher won't dissolve your doubts. Look inward to find the truth within, not outside yourself. Self-understanding is the most important thing. One of my teachers ate very quickly, making loud noises as he ate, yet he taught us to eat slowly and mindfully. Observing him, I became disappointed and frustrated. I suffered while he remained at ease. The truth is, I was observing externally rather than reflecting on myself. Later, I understood this. Some people drive very fast yet are careful, while others drive slowly but cause many accidents. Do not cling to fixed rules. Do not get attached to outward appearances. Look at others 10% of the time and spend 90% reflecting on yourself. Teaching morality is difficult. Some understand but refuse to practice. Others don't understand and won't seek to learn. I don't know how to teach such people. Why are they like this? Ignorance is bad enough, but even when I teach, they won't listen. They doubt the practice. They always question it. They want to reach nirvana but refuse to practice. This is a great obstacle. When told to meditate, they are afraid. If not afraid, they sit and sleep. Most enjoy doing things I haven't taught. This is the suffering of being a teacher. If seeing the Buddha's truth were easy, we wouldn't need so many teachers. Once you understand the Buddha's teachings, you only need to do what must be done. The challenge for teachers is that students reject the Dharma, argue with the Dharma, and even argue with the teacher. In front of the teacher, they act good, but behind the teacher's back, they are like thieves. Teaching the Dharma is truly difficult. I never teach students to live and practice carelessly without mindfulness, but that's what they do when I'm absent. If you ask the police whether there are thieves nearby, they'll say no, because they haven't seen them. But when the police aren't around, the thieves operate freely. This happened even during the Buddha's time. Therefore, observe yourself and monitor your own actions. Don't concern yourself with others. A true teacher often gives difficult meditation practices that require great effort to eliminate the self. No matter what happens, do not abandon your teacher. Let them guide you because it is easy to stray from the path of practice. Doubt in the teacher can be helpful. Accept the good things they offer and remain aware of your own practice. Wisdom arises when you reflect and develop through your own effort. Don't believe the fruit is sweet just because the teacher says so. Taste it yourself to know its true flavor, and all doubt will disappear. A teacher points out the path, but success depends on your own practice. Teaching can sometimes be very challenging. A monk is like a garbage bin where people throw all their frustrations and problems. The more students you teach, the more trash you must deal with. But teaching is a beautiful practice. It helps develop patience and understanding. A teacher cannot solve your difficulties for you. They are merely a guide to learning the way. A teacher cannot make the path clearer. What they teach is meant to be practiced, not just heard. The Buddha never praised faith in others. Faith in oneself is essential. This is difficult, but it must be so. We look outward but fail to see. True understanding comes through real practice. Doubts are not resolved by learning from others, but through persistent practice. Understanding and Wisdom 136. No one and nothing can liberate you. Only your own understanding can set you free. 137. Both a fool and an arahant can smile, but the arahant knows why they smile, while the fool does not. A wise person observes others with wisdom, not ignorance. Observing with wisdom allows one to learn much, while observing with ignorance leads only to finding faults in others. 139. The real problem is knowing but not acting. Not knowing and therefore not acting is natural, but knowing and refusing to act is a serious issue. 140. Studying texts is not of paramount importance. Scriptures are true, but they cannot fully express the truth. They are words and writings which have limited expressive power. For instance, the word anger cannot fully convey the state of being angry, just as hearing someone's name is different from meeting them in person. Only your own experience brings true faith. 141. When you view things with inner wisdom, you will not cling to them. Whether good or bad comes, whether joy or sorrow arises, observe them and let them pass. They will not bind you. If greed or anger arises, use wisdom to see their impermanent nature and let them go naturally. Reacting to them, either loving or hating them, leads to trouble. Reaction not only shows a lack of wisdom, but also increases suffering. 142. Understanding the truth eliminates excessive thought and fosters wisdom. Without understanding, thoughts multiply beyond wisdom, or there is no wisdom at all. Thinking too much without wisdom leads to immense suffering. 143. People today are not interested in seeking the truth. They study only to gain the knowledge necessary to sustain themselves, support their families, and care for one another. For them, intelligence and cleverness are valued more than wisdom. Virtue 144. Be mindful in upholding precepts. The essence of precepts is a sense of shame. If you are in doubt, refrain from speaking or acting. That is virtue. Only when doubt is gone can purity and clarity be attained. 145. There are two levels of practicing the Dharma. The first and foundational level is observing precepts which bring happiness, comfort, and harmony. The next, more advanced level, is unrelated to comfort. It is practicing the Dharma to awaken and free the mind from all attachments. Freeing the mind is the source of compassion and wisdom. 146. Virtue is the parent of the Dharma that grows within us. It nourishes us and points us toward the true path. 147. Virtue is the foundation for creating a harmonious world where people live as true human beings and not like animals. Observing precepts is essential for meditation practice. By keeping precepts, cultivating kindness, respecting others, and being mindful in speech and actions, you build your legacy. If precepts serve as the foundation for your actions, your mind will become gentle, clear, and calm. Meditation will flourish naturally in this fertile ground. 148. Care for and uphold precepts like a gardener tending to their plants, without attaching importance to whether the tree is big or small, significant or insignificant. Some people want shortcuts, saying, skip concentration and go straight to insight meditation, skip precepts and go straight to meditation. We often find excuses to justify our cravings. 149. Right effort and wisdom are not external matters, but involve inner steadfastness, mindfulness, and self-control. Acts of generosity, when done with good intentions, bring happiness to both giver and receiver. However, without virtue as the root, such generosity lacks purity and clarity. 144. The Buddha taught us to do good, avoid evil, and keep the mind pure. This applies to our meditation practice as well. Do good, avoid harm. Are harmful tendencies still present in your mind? Of course they are. So why not clean the house and make it spotless? Practicing correctly, doing good and avoiding harm, is a noble path but a limited one. Ultimately, we must transcend both good and evil. Liberation encompasses everything but clings to nothing. From this detachment, compassion and wisdom flow naturally. 145. We must begin exactly where we are, directly and simply. The first two steps are completing virtue and right view. The third step, wisdom, uprooting defilements, will naturally follow. Just as when a lamp is lit, we no longer worry about darkness or where it has gone. We simply know there is light. 146. There are three levels of observing precepts. The first is receiving precepts from a teacher. The second is keeping and living in accordance with the precepts. The highest level, that of the noble ones, involves no conscious thought of precepts, right or wrong. True virtue arises from wisdom and deep understanding of the Four Noble Truths. The actions of noble beings flow naturally from their realization. 147. Many monks disrobe and enter the battlefield, throwing themselves into danger. They willingly go, prepared to face threats from all sides. They are ready to die in war, yet no one seems willing to die to uphold virtue. How strange this is. Miscellaneous 154. One of Ajahn Chah's students had knee surgery. Although the doctor said it would heal in a few weeks, months later, it still hurt. When the student complained to Ajahn Chah, saying, They said it wouldn't take this long. It's not supposed to be like this. Ajahn Chah smiled and replied, if it's not supposed to be like this, then it wouldn't be like this. 154. If someone offered you a golden, plump, sweet-smelling banana but told you it was poisonous, would you eat it? Of course not. So why, when the Buddha teaches that worldly pleasures are poison, do you still want to fill yourself with them? 155. Look at your defilements and recognize them as the venom of a cobra. You wouldn't dare touch a cobra because you know it could kill you. Similarly, see the danger in harmful things and the benefit in beneficial things. 156. We are never satisfied. When we eat something sweet, we miss the sour taste. When we eat something sour, we miss the sweet taste. 157. If you carry something foul-smelling in your pocket, you'll smell it wherever you go. Don't complain that this place or that place smells bad. Eastern Buddhism today is like a large tree producing small, flavorless fruit. Western Buddhism is like a young sapling that hasn't yet borne fruit but has the potential to produce large, sweet ones. 159. People today think a lot. There are many things they find fascinating and enjoyable, but none of them are truly fulfilling. 160. Just calling plain water wine doesn't turn it into wine. You know this. Yet when you want to drink wine, you tell if it's water and drink it without hesitation. Isn't that madness? 161. People have a habit of looking outward. For instance, when they see this lecture hall, they say, "This hall is so big." But it's not big at all. Whether it's big or not depends on your perception. In truth, the hall simply is. It's neither big nor small. Yet people always chase after their senses, busy judging everything around them without taking time to look within themselves. 154. Many people grow tired, discouraged, and lazy in their meditation practice. It seems they don't want to keep the Dharma in their hearts. Yet if someone insults them, they'll remember it for the rest of their lives. But when the Dharma teaches them to balance their minds, to restrain themselves, and to practice diligently, they quickly forget. Why not keep the Dharma in your heart? Why cling to insults instead? 155. Thinking you are better than others is wrong. Thinking you are equal to others is also wrong. Thinking you are worse than others is wrong as well. Thinking you're superior breeds arrogance. Thinking you're equal leads to a lack of respect and humility. Thinking you're inferior undermines confidence and determination. Let go of everything. 165. Learn to let go of all worldly matters without resisting them. Accept and work with them. When the body is sick and in pain, we recite prayers. We try to control and manipulate the body, unwilling to accept its suffering. Chanting becomes a kind of mystical ritual that deepens our attachment. This happens because we chant to eliminate illness and seek longevity. In truth, the Buddha gave us the Dharma to understand the nature of the body so we could let go of it. Instead, we turn his teachings into prayers that increase our delusion. 166. Examine your body and mind. Be content with simplicity and modesty. Don't cling too tightly to the Dharma. Don't hold on or jump to embrace your emotions. 167. Many fear generosity. They feel oppressed and exploited when asked to give. To cultivate kindness, you only need to restrain your own greed and attachment. No one is oppressing you. By doing so, your true nature will conquer itself, becoming lighter and freer. Holding a neighbor's ember will burn you. Holding your own ember will burn you too. Both are hot, so avoid touching anything that will burn you, no matter where it comes from. And 65. Outsiders may think we are mad for living in the forest, sitting still like statues. But how do they live? They laugh, they cry, and sometimes they even kill one another out of greed and anger. So who is truly mad? 166. Instead of instructing people directly, Ajahn Chah created special circumstances and opportunities for them to explore themselves. He said, "You'll only understand 15% of what I teach you. If you've been a monk for 5 years, you might understand 5%. A young monk replied, "Then I must understand 1% since I've been a monk for 1 year." Ajahn Chah shook his head and laughed. "No, you'll understand nothing for the first 4 years. In the 5th year, you'll grasp 5%. 167. When asked if a young monk would keep his robes for life or disrobe, the monk answered, "It's hard to say. I don't think about disrobing, but I can't say I'll wear these robes until I die." Reflecting inwardly, the monk said, It seems my mind doesn't really matter at all. Ajahn Chah replied, "The fact that the mind doesn't matter, that is the Dharma." 168. When asked why a Buddhist country like Thailand has so much crime, Ajahn Chah responded, "Those who do unwholesome acts are not Buddhists. Their actions have nothing to do with Buddhism. The Buddha never taught them to do such things." 169. When asked if he was an arahant, Ajahn Chah replied, "I'm like a big tree full of leaves, flowers, and fruit. Birds come to eat and nest in it, but the tree doesn't understand itself. It simply exists as it is." 65. Q. I can observe greed and anger, but how can I control ignorance? You're like someone riding a horse and asking, "Where's the horse?" 166. Some people become monks out of faith, but struggle with living and practicing the Dharma. They don't understand themselves. Few people truly practice Dharma these days because there are too many obstacles. But if those obstacles are bad, let them die. If they won't die, make them better. 167. You say you love someone completely. Fine, dissect their body and see how much love remains. Or if you miss them terribly when they're away, why not ask them to send you a bucket of their waste? Every time you miss them, open the bucket and take a whiff. Disgusting, isn't it? That's what you claim to love. What makes your heart race when you see an attractive person or smell their perfume? What force draws you in while you surrender without resistance? In the end, it costs you dearly. Do you understand now? 168. One day, Ajahn Chah wanted to move a large broken tree blocking the path. He and a student lifted it together and threw it aside. As they lifted it, Ajahn Chah asked, "Is it heavy?" After throwing it away, he asked, "Is it still heavy now?" This is how Ajahn Chah taught students to find the Dharma in everyday words and actions. In this instance, he demonstrated the benefit of letting go. 169. A student accidentally grabbed an exposed electrical plug while unplugging a tape recorder and was shocked. He quickly let go. Ajahn Chah, seizing the teaching opportunity, said, "Oh, how did you let go so easily? Who taught you that?" 170. Some Western monks organized a Christmas celebration with gift-giving and charity. When lay people questioned why Buddhists celebrated a Christian holiday, Ajahn Chah explained, "The body and mind of all beings share the same nature. Everyone is born, grows old, and dies. Once you understand this, differences become irrelevant. Anything that helps us see the truth and do good is a right practice. Call it whatever you want. Why not call it Buddha Christ Dharma Day? Whoever practices rightly is practicing Buddha Christ Dharma, and that's good." 165. During a refugee crisis in Thailand, many organizations provided aid. Some Western monks felt guilty about meditating in the forest while others worked tirelessly. Ajahn Chah said, "Helping in refugee camps is good. It's a natural duty. But to help others, you must first be clear and not deluded. Many can hand out clothes and food, but few can sit in the forest and examine their own minds. Until we know how to feed and clothe the mind, the world will always have refugees." 166. After hearing a disciple recite the Heart Sutra, Ajahn Chah said, "There is no emptiness, and there is no bodhisattva," and asked, "Where did this sutra come from?" The student replied, "I believe the Buddha taught it." Ajahn Chah responded, "There is no Buddha. This sutra speaks of profound wisdom beyond worldly conditions. But without using worldly conditions, how could we express it? Is that not so?" 167. To become enlightened, one must transform completely, leaving only the physical body behind. The mind changes entirely, yet the body remains, still subject to heat, cold, pain, and illness. However, the transformed mind views birth, aging, illness, and death through the lens of truth. 168. When asked about enlightenment, Ajahn Chah said, "Enlightenment isn't hard to understand. Peel a banana and taste it. You'll immediately know its flavor. Practice to realize it yourself. Be persistent. If enlightenment were easy, everyone would have attained it. I started at age 8 and have been a monk for over 40 years. Yet some want to meditate for just a night or two and go straight to nirvana. Enlightenment isn't instant. You don't just sit down, get hit on the head, and achieve it. You don't need to fully attain enlightenment to guide others. Just be honest and share what you know from your own experience. Speak only of what you've truly grasped, and people will trust you." 165. The worldly way is to work with the expectation of reward. In Buddhism, we act without seeking returns. But if we want nothing, what do we get? Nothing. What we usually gain is the cause of suffering. So practice to gain nothing, and the mind will be peaceful and calm. That is enough. 166. The Buddha taught us to let go of everything impermanent and unstable. If you let go, you will see the truth. If you don't, you won't. It's that simple. When wisdom arises, you'll see the truth everywhere. 167. An empty mind doesn't mean it lacks anything. It is free of defilements yet full of wisdom. 168. People refuse to reflect on aging, illness, and death. They only want to talk about not aging, not suffering, and not dying. Thus, they never taste the Dharma's essence. 169. Many believe happiness is getting what they love or like, and only want to hear others talk about what pleases them. Is that how you seek happiness? Do you expect the whole world to align with your preferences? That's impossible. Seeking happiness this way will never succeed. 170. Grass, flowers, trees, and mountains live according to their nature. They grow and die naturally, without awareness. We, however, disturb everything. Yet our bodies also follow nature's way: birth, growth, and eventual death. If you expect your body to act otherwise, you will suffer. 171. Don't think that learning a lot means understanding the Dharma. That's like saying you see everything because you have eyes, or hear everything because you have ears. You may see, but not fully. You only see with outer eyes, not inner eyes, and hear with outer ears, not inner ears. 165. The Buddha taught us to abandon unwholesome actions and cultivate virtue. This is the right path. By doing this, the Buddha has placed us at the starting point. Whether we walk it or not is up to us. The Buddha's task is complete. He has shown us the path. What happens next is our responsibility. 166. You must see the Dharma for yourself. This means practicing on your own. You can rely on a teacher only halfway. Even the Dharma I teach you is just words. If you believe it just because I say it, you won't truly benefit from the teachings. If you completely rely on me, you're foolish. Listen to the Dharma, see its value, and practice it yourself. Only then will it truly benefit you. 167. Sometimes while walking meditation, I've wanted to stop and go inside at the sight of approaching rain. But I remember working in the fields, wearing damp clothes from the night before, and wading through mud to lead buffalo out of the pen. The buffalo would flick their tails, splattering me with dirt. My legs ached, yet I kept going. I thought, life is so hard. Now, a little rain makes me want to stop meditation? Such thoughts motivate me to practice the Dharma. 168. I don't know how to explain this. I speak of things to do and things to let go of, yet there's nothing to do and nothing to let go of. Invitation. Everything I've said so far is simply words. When someone comes to see me, I have something to say to them. But it's better not to talk too much about these things. Practice is far more important. Start practicing. Don't delay any longer. I'm like a good friend inviting you to journey to a certain place. Don't hesitate. Set out on the path. You will never regret it.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Mind Podcast, Buddhism. Today we will explore a profound and transformative topic. The Buddha teaches the way to escape suffering. Join us as we delve into the wisdom and practical guidance that can help us transcend pain and discover lasting peace and happiness. Renounce and craving. Nowadays, banners are widely used to advise young people in society as a whole to avoid the path leading to HIV and AIDS, with striking slogans such as "Don't die from ignorance." Banners reflect a decisive attitude to end or discourage indulgence in drugs, illustrated with a skull crossed out and the caption, "Don't try even once." One attempt is enough to bring death. One attempt is enough to bring suffering, regret, and an inability to renew life. These decisive attitudes help people boldly end harmful behaviors when they see them as unnecessary for a happy life. Similarly, in the scriptures, the Buddha provided many images and slogans to guide his followers on the path of ethics to attain joy according to the Dharma. The image that the Tathagata advises is to install the element and attitude of renunciation in the nature of the stream of enjoying sensory pleasures. The renunciation of craving program is designed to seek out sexual activity needs, control, and transform these needs to help practitioners achieve long-term cultivation. For lay people, sexual activity needs are confined within the scope of the law and marital life. Renunciation can be understood as letting go of a debt, discarding a burden from one's shoulders, or escaping from pulling a cart. This state of lightness and comfort is free from any emotional entanglements. Renunciation creates a value of ease and freedom from entanglements. For lay people, having extramarital affairs creates entanglements, secrecy, fatigue, and tension. For monks and nuns, indulging in sensory pleasures results in the loss of everything they have committed to their spiritual life over many years for a certain ideal. Seeing these as burdens or chains that can destroy a happy life, renunciation and transformation can occur smoothly without using any coercive force for control. The need for sensory pleasure can arise from consciousness, through a self-controlled, self-installed program with heightened awareness, or with support from very artistic visualization methods. What happens when desire ends? This is a major question posed by many lay people or those who do not accept the path of celibacy practiced by Buddhist monks, who transform sexual energy while other religions still allow their clergy to have family lives. Buddhism is the only religion that advises its monastics to not concern themselves with or pay attention to household life in such a manner. Thus, the question arises, after desire ends, does a person still have the value of life, since it is a very natural instinct? Another question follows, if all men and women follow Buddhism, will humanity face extinction? Even if everyone were to follow Buddhism, this scenario would not lead to human extinction. In the endless cycle of rebirth, those who transform their sexual energy become saints. They do not continue the process of lineage or reproduction. However, sentient beings, animals in the Saha world, and beings from other planets, after repaying their karma, will be reborn as humans. The process of transformation from humans to heavenly beings, saints, and from animals to humans happens daily, hourly, every second, every minute, everywhere. Some beings from other planets are reborn as humans on this planet, and vice versa. Therefore, even if this entire planet practiced Buddhism in an artistic and correct manner according to the Buddhist teachings, there would never be a state of human extinction. Moreover, the number of people who become monks and nuns is very small. The highest is in Tibet, where the proportion of monastics is around 40%. In Thailand, it is about 5 to 6%. Even though every man must go through a monastic life upon reaching adulthood. Therefore, it is unnecessary to ask questions that will never happen in reality. Another viewpoint is, I need to continue my family line. Going into monastic life will deprive my intellectual potential in fields like economics, art, and other areas from serving society. Besides, there are many sperm banks worldwide, particularly those of scientists, scholars, and outstanding talents. People hope that these exceptional genes, when implanted into women's bodies, will create intellectuals for society. In reality, the structure and influence of genetic inheritance only function to a limited extent. Karma determines genetic inheritance. Karma creates changes beyond the structure and nature of genes. This is undeniable. Many teachers are educators, yet give birth to children who burn books. Many virtuous parents give birth to incorrigible children. Human character is related to karma. Karma directly or indirectly connects to customs, educational traditions, environment, circumstances, and interactional behavior. Genes alone are insufficient. Thus, there is no need to fear extinction. When desire ends, something else remains, which is transformed energy. This energy is clearly stated in the scriptures. Achieving the ultimate peaceful life, free from all suffering, the practitioner's mind will be absolutely at peace. The practitioner will attain the qualities of a saint, becoming the highest among humans and heavenly beings. Ending desire does not mean losing it. It does not mean extinction, but becoming a person with greater, more substantial, and more lasting contributions. Buddhist talents often come from disciples who seek refuge, not from those born into that particular sect or lineage. A lineage or sect can have hundreds of thousands of disciples, but the successor often comes from elsewhere. In Buddhism, many disciples have relied on their teacher's reputation, influence, and position in society, religion, or the community. This reliance often hinders their long-term advancement. Therefore, high-ranking monks are ready to teach disciples from other lineages who can still bring equivalent or greater value than their own disciples. Lay people are similar. People typically want to pass on the secrets of their trade to their biological children rather than to strangers. Today, this trend has changed in the West. Some millionaires and billionaires, seeing that their children lack filial piety, believe that transferring the family fortune could lead to their corruption. Hence, many parents hide their financial accounts. They make wills while still healthy so that, if something unexpected happens, their account balances automatically transfer to charity programs or educational and social welfare funds. They clearly see that the value of happiness does not lie in continuing the family line, but in serving whom, how, and to what extent. At some point, people adopt such a perspective, and compassion begins to expand. No longer does one serve solely one's family members, but also those who are not related. This reduces competition, exploitation, and rivalry to a minimum. If one only cares for their relatives, selfishness and self-interest are present. When the scope of care expands, that selfishness and self-interest transforming sexual desire. The sutra describes the art of helping the co-practitioner, the celestial ruler Saka, transform his sexual energy. Saka made a request to the Blessed One, "Please give me a brief teaching on how to transform sexual energy for a practitioner." By this, he meant, "I don't have much time to listen, and I lack the patience to learn." Moreover, he did not approach the Blessed One with the eager attitude of a monastic, as his inherent role was to enjoy sexual activities. Although the sutra does not clearly state his intentions, it can be inferred from his questioning manner and the way he received the teachings that Saka might have wanted to be a co-practitioner of the Venerable Moggallana, or he wanted his sexual indulgence not to cause him to fall from the 33 heavens to lower realms. After the Blessed One delivered the brief teaching, Saka bowed and immediately disappeared. This was a way of avoiding, as Saka feared that if the teaching was too long, he might be convinced to replace his worldly needs with monastic life. He knew well that many who approached the Blessed One, intending to challenge him, ended up becoming his disciples after just one discourse or dialogue. The miraculous ability to transform through education made Saka aware that he did not want to linger any longer in conversation with the Blessed One. After hearing the teaching, he disappeared immediately. From a distance, seeing this, Venerable Moggallana used his supernatural powers to quickly fly from the lecture hall to the 33 heavens. He saw Saka enjoying sensual pleasures with many celestial maidens and attendants in the pure lotus garden. Nearby, 500 celestial musical instruments played 500 types of melodious, enchanting music to create emotional arousal, prolonging the various forms of enjoyment. Seeing the Venerable Moggallana appear, Saka stopped all festivities and greeted him with very polite and respectful words. He invited the Venerable to sit on his throne, while he himself sat on a lower seat to show respect, despite their previous lives as co-practitioners. It is noteworthy that regardless of the royal title or high social status one holds, the spiritual life of laypeople generally remains lower than that of genuine monastics. Respecting true spiritual values enhances the happiness of life. Any government that attempts to suppress the role of spirituality will not last long, as they lose the opportunity to learn about spiritual and ethical living from monastics. The kings of Thailand and other Theravada Buddhist countries bow and pay homage to monastics, even if they have just been ordained that morning. This beautiful tradition continues to this day. The king of Thailand himself has been ordained. Every few years, he enters monastic life for 3 months during the retreat season. Currently, the king of Thailand is very exemplary, with only one wife, unlike King Maidol, who reigned around the mid-20th century and introduced modern Thai cultural contact with the West. He had many wives and nearly 100 children. His life was portrayed in 2 Hollywood films, both of which won Oscars, The King and I and Anna and the King. Returning to the sutra after being warmly welcomed, Venerable Moggallana pretended to probe Saka's mind about the teaching given by the Blessed One. He said, "It would be a great blessing if I could hear a part of the marvelous teaching that the Blessed One briefly gave you earlier." This was an artful way of gauging Saka's thoughts before attempting to transform him or utilizing others' power and mind reading to understand the emotional state of the person needing transformation. Faced with the Venerable's question, Saka found it hard to refuse. However, Saka, being deep and very psychological, replied, "Venerable, I am very busy with many different tasks, both for myself and for the residents of the 33 heavens. This was an excuse so that if he forgot, it would be an understandable oversight. In the second part, Sokka praised, "I listened very attentively to the Blessed One's teaching, and I have grasped and contemplated it thoroughly. I can never forget it." His humble words implicitly sought praise, suggesting that despite being very busy with countless tasks, he still remembered the Blessed One's teachings and could recount them to the Venerable Moggallana, which was indeed a rare achievement. Using excuses to forget is a common way to free oneself from the need to practice. When people have an attitude of making excuses, everything becomes blocked. Fortunately, in the second part, Sokka showed his attentiveness, though it was limited, listening to seek knowledge rather than to practice. Then Sokka expressed pride and admiration for his achievements. Of course, he knew well that he and Venerable Moggallana were co-practitioners. The Venerable had become an arahant, powerfully supporting the Blessed One's teaching efforts. Meanwhile, Sokka had become the celestial ruler of the 33 heavens, once leading his disciples to hear the Blessed One's teachings. But his excessive pride made him blind to the spiritual value of Venerable Moggallana, even though he invited the Venerable to sit on his throne. He boasted, "The supreme palace, Vesavana, that I created is the result of a victorious battle between the celestial beings and the Asura realm. These are two realms existing on different planets. The sutra describes that in the Asura world, men are very ugly while women are very beautiful. Celestial beings often desire Asura women, hence battles for Asura women have occurred. The celestial beings often win because their scientific knowledge and strategic resources are superior. Anger makes the Asura beings smaller, uglier, and devoid of intelligence and wisdom." Next, he described, "The palace has 100 different spires, each with 7 triangular mansions, each mansion with 7 celestial maidens, and each maiden has 7 attendants. If one does the math, the palace has 4,900 celestial maidens as his wives and 34,300 attendants serving them." Sokka invited the Venerable to tour the magnificent palace, radiant with the colors of 7 different precious gems. Venerable Moggallana silently accepted the invitation, intending to accompany him to create an opportunity to transform his arrogance. Excessive pride made Sokka lose the potential and seeds of a renounced life he had planted in previous lives with Venerable Moggallana. Celestial ruler Sokka and King Vesavana allowed Venerable Moggallana to go ahead. The sutra describes, as they passed through each triangular mansion and spire, many celestial maidens and attendants bowed their heads shyly, like brides meeting their fathers-in-law. This shyness creates an enchanting beauty that attracts love and sexual desire. Living in such an environment, it is difficult for people to escape enjoyment. However, Venerable Moggallana, having attained arahantship, was not conquered by the subtle expressions of love through the feminine form as Sokka had been. Victory often makes people arrogant. Through conquest and invasion, kings with strategic prowess expand their territories and often become highly arrogant, believing themselves to be unparalleled geniuses. Sokka also fell into this state of arrogance. Admiring the magnificence of the palace, he told his co-practitioner, "On Earth, when people see the magnificent planet we created, they know it is the 33 heavens established by celestial ruler Sokka. Previous celestial rulers could not achieve this." Arrogance led to a sense of entitlement, seeing himself as the most contributive. If Sokka's past life had not been a practitioner, his need for enjoying sensual activities would have been much greater. Knowing creates stopping, and understanding creates ending. Not knowing, not understanding, can entangle one in enjoyment. Here, Sokka still knew to request the Buddha to teach about transforming sexual energy for practitioners, as he had failed in previous lives, and in the current life, he also completely failed. Too much pleasure makes it difficult to practice. In the past, monks practiced in mountains and forests, with limited interaction with the environment and material conditions, so their senses were well controlled, cared for, and transformed. Today, in a diverse, multicultural environment, the factors of interaction create variations, making it difficult to practice and transform emotional needs. Seeing Sokka's excessive arrogance, Venerable Moggallana used his supernatural powers to concentrate force on the tip of his toe. pressing it into the ground. The entire Vesavana palace shook. While celestial ruler Saka and King Vesavana were startled, their hair standing on end, the subjects cheered in amazement at the venerable's rare and miraculous power. Their admiration increased Saka's anxiety, fearing replacement. This forced him to face an internal crisis. He began to contemplate that all sensual happiness could confront impermanence. This notion arose, making him fearful. This was one of the techniques Venerable Moggallana deliberately instilled to awaken the consciousness of impermanence and non-self in Saka's mind, aiming to revive the spiritual seeds the celestial ruler had planted in past lives as a practitioner. Such awakening techniques are very necessary and meaningful. Then, Venerable Moggallana disappeared without a word, leaving behind endless astonishment from admirers and fear from Saka. Before he could calm down, the celestial maidens asked Saka, "Is that the Blessed One, the teacher of the celestial ruler whom you told us about?" Saka shook his head. "That is only my co-practitioner." But the celestial maidens did not believe. It is wonderful that the celestial ruler has a friend with such great supernatural power and miraculous authority. Surely that must be the Blessed One, the celestial ruler's teacher. The doubt further revealed Saka's limitations compared to his co-practitioner. Borrowing the far to speak of the near, Moggallana returned to the lecture hall at the Deer Park, the earthly world, and prostrated before the Buddha in the presence of many monastics and laypeople. He recounted the entire event and requested the Buddha to expound that sutra again. The method of borrowing stories from the heavens to speak of earthly matters is a wonderful art of teaching in the traditional sutras of the Tathagata. Here, the concept of speaking of heavenly matters is not about fantastical elements, but rather very realistic ones. Borrowing stories from the heavens to discuss earthly matters is a technique of creating comparisons. Comparisons can lead to arrogance, but can also inspire progress, urging one to strive for what has not yet been achieved. Opening the door to comparisons ensures one never remains proudly self-satisfied as number one. Venerable Moggallana borrowed stories from the heavens to discuss matters on earth. Of course, he did not speak, he merely recounted. Everyone present listened. The psychological effect encouraged all genuine monastics to see that transforming sensory pleasures can bring happiness to humans. Otherwise, people may fall into unstable and temporary happiness. Precarious happiness often occurs in relationships and marriages when boredom starts to appear after a period of interaction and cohabitation. The tendency to seek someone more attractive in appearance, talent, economics, or other needs can dissipate the sense of happiness. This happiness is very temporary. When witnessing Moggallana's display of miraculous powers, the celestial maidens exclaimed in admiration, signifying that the husband's image became dim and ordinary. This need for replacement and comparison creates more competition. This is the method of borrowing stories from the heavens to discuss earthly matters. In love and marriage, comparing in such a way leads to regret and living in illusions, not acknowledging the present reality. The Blessed One often did not teach without a request. The request creates a psychological effect of anticipation and longing, and the value of this longing makes it easier for the listener to absorb the teachings, leading to successful practice. The Blessed One recounted the sutra, and everyone present, especially Venerable Moggallana, was immensely joyful, believed, and practiced accordingly. Meanwhile, the beginning of the sutra describes that Saka only joyfully prostrated before the Blessed One and then disappeared, without genuine faith. Joy does not mean faith. He was joyful after hearing the teaching, thanked, and left. Believing and considering it as philosophy to practice is another matter. Here, the psychological effect of the Buddha's sutra on Saka, a celestial ruler with many means of enjoyment, was entirely different from that on Venerable Moggallana and the Buddha's monastic disciples. The greatest psychological effect the Buddha needed was not just joy, but faith, acceptance, reverence, and practice. Faith means believing with true faith in the truth, with intellect, understanding, judgment, and knowledge. Acceptance means practicing, receiving, and integrating it into the mind as a guideline. Reverence means upholding it with all respect. Practice means propagating it, maintaining it oneself, and spreading it to others to expand its reach. The sutra addresses two aspects of life. The first tendency is to immerse in pleasures, where listeners hear the teachings casually, without serious practice, not aiming for liberation because their roles and positions do not drive them to greater needs. Limited karmic consciousness creates limited lifetimes. Limited understanding creates limited happiness and suffering. Celestial ruler Sokka is an exemplary figure. He thinks of himself as a victor. All his achievements make him boastful, acting familiar with the nobility. Recall the question the celestial maidens posed to him. Is this the Blessed One you have told us about? He had talked a lot about the Blessed One to his wives, but never created opportunities for them to meet him. This indicates that he wanted to show that only he had the qualification to interact with the esteemed, especially the top figure in spirituality and ethics, while his maidens in attendance never had such opportunities. This was a way to boost his ego. When introducing Venerable Moggallana, once again, Sokka wanted to boast about having extraordinary friends. His art of boastfulness made him act familiar, creating an important position for himself that others did not have. Today, when interacting with spiritual and ethical leaders, people of significant social roles should avoid the element of acting familiar. Think of it as an equal opportunity to contribute to each other's needs. Monastics do not seek favor from authorities or people with social roles, but treat them as ordinary people. Sometimes, people of significant social roles visit temples and are not warmly received by the abbots, making them reluctant to return. They want their ego boosted, while monks aim to transform their ego. The purpose of these different attitudes leads to different outcomes. The second tendency, the Blessed One wanted listeners to hear not just to understand and boast about the knowledge they gained, but to practice and propagate. The path to enlightenment is established on knowledge, based on thinking and demonstrated through specific actions. Although the sutra is primarily for monastics, lay people can still learn, especially those heavily addicted to sensual pleasures, where addiction can lead to family ruin and suffering for spouses and children. Applying even 30% of the Blessed One's teachings can significantly reduce these enjoyment needs. The success of a practitioner is transforming this energy. After transforming sexual energy, one becomes selfless and altruistic, with boundless compassion unrestricted by any form. Learning this sutra enhances the seeds of practice, seeds to cultivate happiness in marriage, love, and all areas related directly or indirectly to the senses. Recognizing the links, the Great Discourse on the Destruction of Craving, number 38 in the middle-length discourses, addresses the art of severing the links of suffering. The use of the image links of suffering to translate the Pali term Tana Sankhaya, which means destruction of craving, arises because the act of destruction evokes the image of cutting from the root. Craving refers to the attitude of attachment to the essence of suffering and all images directly or indirectly related to it. Instead of saying, cutting the links of craving, one could say, cutting the links of suffering, as the nature of craving leads to suffering. The discourse originates from an incident involving a monastic named Sati, who mistakenly believed that the consciousness transmigrates through the realms of existence without undergoing any change. In response, the Buddha analyzed the doctrine of dependent origination, explaining the nature of conditions that directly or indirectly affect the functioning of body and mind. Through this, he guided the method of severing the process and links of suffering. In the discourse, The Snake Catcher, number 22, the Blessed One explained the attitude that enjoying sexual activities does not hinder the spiritual path and life of a liberated person, but highlighted the nature of sensual craving and attachment to sexuality. In this discourse, the Blessed One teaches and analyzes the nature of wrong views, the attitude of attachment to erroneous practice and concepts, which are equally significant in leading to suffering in the cycle of birth and death. In Buddhism, attachment is regarded as a link of bondage. Clinging to any viewpoint initiates bondage. If one says, living without a standpoint makes life meaningless, then standpoint here can be understood as an attitude of attachment to what is right, to ethics, to spiritual values, etc. Even though these are right, good, and valuable, attachment to them also leads to links of consequence. Buddhism never uses the concept of a standpoint, but only the true path or spiritual principles that have the value of transformation and bring happiness. In other words, the true path and spiritual principles are not for attachment, but are used as tools. The nature of a tool is conditional. It may be very suitable in one situation, but may become meaningless in another. It can be an ideal choice for one person, but can be utterly meaningless for others. It corresponds to the character and level of karmic consciousness of individuals. The issue is that Buddhism never teaches practitioners to cling to anything, even if it is the path or the principles, but to use the path and principles as effective means that can bring about happiness. Spiritual trends. The traditional Brahminical trend, starting from the Vedic scriptures, this trend equates what is stated in these texts as the ultimate truth, with the author being none other than the supreme God or Brahma. Consequently, a stratified social structure composed of various castes emerged under the imposition of this perspective, discouraging people from questioning or altering it. This trend brought suffering to many people, alongside the happiness of the upper echelons of society, which included the elite intellectuals of the traditional Brahminical school and the royal tradition. The remaining 80% of India's social structure became victims of this erroneous view. This view, a form of attachment to wrong tradition, led to the miseries of the populace in a nation. The Brahminical tradition was considered a formidable fortress, challenged over a significant period by a new spiritual tradition, the Shramana tradition. The term Shramana was initially used to denote all those who renounced, rejecting the philosophical traditions of the Vedic scriptures, challenging the truths stated in these texts, and not acknowledging the role of Brahma as the creator, the social inequality of the four castes, gender inequality, and many other social ills. These renunciants sought a spiritual path different from the tradition imposed on them. Four notable Shramana traditions emerged. 1. Natural Shramana tradition. These ascetics wandered from place to place, living a life of austerity, hoping that their senses would lose the capacity for enjoyment, paving the way for spiritual emergence. 2. Austerity Shramana tradition. This included practices like standing without sitting or lying down, or lying on thorns or rough rocks to create physical discomfort, aiming to eliminate all passions and desires. This tradition also fell under the natural Shramana tradition. 3. Jain Shramana tradition. These ascetics practiced severe austerities, abstaining from meat and not killing any living beings, but they often fell into extreme practices. They aimed to return to a primal state by living naked, without any material possessions. These three spiritual traditions opened new paths that challenged the Brahminical tradition. However, in the process of replacement and challenge, their content was not entirely accepted due to various limitations. For instance, while the Brahminical tradition advocated a caste-based society, the Shramana tradition rejected this system, but failed to provide a convincing ethical, spiritual, social, and logical foundation. Moreover, some natural Shramana practitioners expressed a primitive materialistic attitude, denying any afterlife. This notion could be dangerous to ethical life, because if the moral cause and effect relationship between the present and future life is not established, people may lose responsibility for their actions, leading to ethical degradation and communal suffering. The Shramana tradition of the Tathagata. The Tathagata's, Buddha's tradition emerged with many values, strongly attracting spiritual life. He was also a Shramana, but excelled in practice methods and the realistic values of these methods, achieving long-lasting and thorough transformation that could uproot suffering. This tradition became the new spiritual soil and nourishment of India. However, due to the rapid influx of many monks into the Buddha's Sangha, many did not abandon the erroneous views they held as practitioners of the Shramana and Brahminical traditions. These erroneous views continued to influence and shape the correct viewpoints of properly practicing monks who lacked the faith and solid knowledge to recognize the harmful non-traditional Buddhist views affecting their spiritual practice. One such individual was the monk Sati. The method of practice often originates from the mind's perception. When the mind's perception is flawed, everything that follows, whether directly or indirectly, can be influenced. Recognizing mistakes, the sutra serves both educational purposes and propagates teachings that parents can apply to help their children and loved ones when they identify incomplete aspects in their understanding, character, tendencies, and life. For the Buddha, there was no imposition or elevation of truth into something that others must follow through compulsion in correcting and transforming wrong views. Bhikkhu Sati, who came from a low-caste fishing family, held the view that consciousness is a process that roams through the 6 realms and 3 paths without any change in essence, cognition, or psychology leading to daily behavior. This view is considered central and core to Brahminical philosophy. They believe that the human mind does not change. Anyone born a Brahmin will be reborn as a Brahmin for thousands of lifetimes. Anyone born into a royal family or as a ruler of a nation will have descendants who inherit that spiritual tradition. Conversely, those from lower caste carry the nature, mindset, tendencies, seeds, and capabilities of inferiority, binding their fate to their mother's womb. This belief leads to a deterministic view of social structure and daily life, which still perpetuates suffering in Indian society today. When fellow monks learned of Bhikkhu Sati's erroneous view, they used various methods, including questioning and refutation, to prove that this view was unorthodox in Buddhism. As a Buddhist monk, one should never propagate the values of non-Buddhist teachings as truth. Everyone has the right to free will, free opinion, and free doctrine. The Buddha acknowledged this, but when someone claims to speak the Buddha's teachings, the content must align with what the Tathagata taught. One cannot mix and equate 2 different viewpoints, doctrines from Brahmanism or pre-Buddhist religions, and claim them as part of the Tathagata's teachings. This causes confusion between 2 entirely different contents. Fellow practitioners advise Bhikkhu Sati not to cling to, accept, or maintain his erroneous view. The Buddha had declared, all phenomena in this life are formed by conditions. Human consciousness is the same. It is a set of conditions. Without conditions or lacking conditions, consciousness cannot exist and manifest. Despite this, Bhikkhu Sati stubbornly maintained his view. The community, realizing they could not persuade their fellow monk, respectfully reported the matter to the Buddha. The Buddha summoned Bhikkhu Sati to clarify if he indeed held that view, or if the monks had falsely accused him due to disagreements or personal dislikes. Naturally, with his divine insight and wisdom, the Buddha knew very well who held what views, their mental states and tendencies. He saw the mental formations in their paths clearly. However, in societal terms, he still used the law to clarify the situation transparently. The Tathagata knew Bhikkhu Sati had a mistaken view, but to use this as an educational opportunity to help others with similar misunderstandings avoid greater and more serious mistakes, the Buddha gathered the monks and lay disciples to listen to his explanation to Bhikkhu Sati. When questioned, Bhikkhu Sati confirmed that all the reports were true. The Buddha asserted, due to misunderstanding and not fully grasping what the Tathagata taught about samsara, karma, the process of cause and effect, and human ethical responsibilities for actions, Sati holds a wrong view. If this wrong view is not transformed, not only will Sati destroy his own happiness, but worse, he will bring misfortune and suffering to others. This is one of the ways to self-harm one's virtue. Bhikkhu Sati proclaimed a doctrine and claimed that the Tathagata endorsed it, thus attributing to the Buddha a view he never held, taught, or propagated, leading people to misunderstand his teachings. This obstructs spiritual progress through his teachings. When equating 2 different views from 2 different religious traditions, people steeped in the Brahminical spiritual tradition cannot see the unique aspects of the Buddha's teachings and follow this new path. Therefore, when proclaiming and spreading a mistaken view attributed to the Tathagata, its influence and harm are immense. The Buddha stated, if there is intentional and deliberate distortion of the Tathagata's views, it is self-destructive. Self-destructive means losing the path to enlightenment, preventing others from seeing the profound and wonderful Dharma. The Buddha clearly stated, there cannot be a spark from the mistaken view that the essence of consciousness is fixed and unchanging in the process of birth and death. In today's era, this view may seem obvious since people have experienced extensive education, learning from predecessors, religions, philosophy, ethics, etc. However, in the Buddha's time, this was a very unfamiliar concept. In the process of birth and death, consciousness changes when humans are reborn as humans, celestial beings, animals, or hungry ghosts, enduring various sufferings and pains related to emotions, cognition, etc. These are influenced by speech, thoughts, and actions during life in human form or other forms of existence. Thoughts, feelings, tendencies, emotions, attitudes, ideals, and ideologies change continuously. Even the most steadfast or conservative people experience change sooner or later to some extent. In the process of birth and death, how can one maintain a fixed nature? The Tathagata emphasized, if we see that human consciousness constantly changes, then there cannot be a fixed fate of emotions or cognition. Therefore, there cannot be a predetermined fate of society or humans. The Buddha aimed to show everyone, especially those heavily influenced by Brahminical spiritual traditions, this truth so that social injustices could be transformed and changed. The role of consciousness. The Buddha asked Sati to present his view so that he could analyze and explain the nature of consciousness. Bhikkhu Sati stated, "It is consciousness that is the agent of speaking, feeling, and receiving here and there, and it is also consciousness that causes humans to endure all suffering and actions in general." This view makes it challenging to differentiate between Buddhist and Brahminical teachings. Generally, when discussing responsibility for ethical behavior, people often envision an agent that causes suffering or happiness. Humans are seen as the architects of their own suffering or happiness, and also the recipients of their actions. In terms of communication, declaring such responsibility is necessary to establish the value and impact of behavior on human life. From a deeper philosophical perspective, the concept of an agent is merely a borrowed notion without inherent value. The Buddha's doctrine of non-self does not deny human elements but asserts that humans are a combination of mind and matter. When humans are viewed as a combination of mind and matter, the stream of consciousness, the operation of karma, and conceptualization related directly or indirectly to it can change. Thus, the nature of life is not fixed but a flow of emotions, cognition, and actions. The creation of actions is a flow, and the reception of actions affecting human life is also a flow. This process of change is continuous. This view allows people to renew their lives after having done wrong, planted seeds of unhappiness, and caused suffering to others in the past. If one believes that this agent is fixed and that actions affecting it never change, it creates destiny and determines karma for individuals, society, and the community. According to Brahminical views, Bhikkhu Sati believed that consciousness roams without change. The Buddha highlighted the differences between his teachings on cause and effect and those of Brahmanism. Sati represented the Brahminical view. When performing action A, the result must be A, without change, increase, or decrease, regardless of changes in human psychology and emotions. This deterministic view led to structures like, the noble must remain noble, the humble must remain humble, or a king's son will become a king. The Buddha clearly saw that this deterministic view created the caste-based society of ancient India. The caste system of ancient India was sophisticatedly explained under the perspective of labor division. They believed each person was born into a particular occupation. These occupations together formed the operational structure. Each person played a role, a function. These roles and functions supported and complemented each other. There could be no situation where one person managed all scenarios. Thus, when born as a manual laborer, one continues in that role. Those with political talents, educational skills, or spiritual seeds continue on their path and ideals. There could be no change from one role to another. Each person maintains their role and position. Initially, this doctrine was seen as a truth. Each person is born with different personalities and capabilities. Education can partly change these, but complete change is difficult due to the long-standing determinism imposed on Indian minds. This imposition was elevated to a truth, and they accepted it without question. The Buddha's view, consciousness arises from conditions. Without environmental factors, this consciousness cannot manifest. He provided the metaphor of a flame named based on its fuel source. Fire from wood is called wood fire. Fire from straw is called straw fire. Fire from cow dung in Indian tradition is called cow dung fire. Fire from lightning is called lightning fire, and so on. Depending on the fuel, they have different names, but all indicate one thing. The nature of consciousness constantly changes like the nature of fire. There can be no transfer from the form of straw fire to the ashes formed by the burning straw. If it were fixed, this fire would never extinguish and the straw would never be consumed. The Buddha emphasized, if human consciousness were fixed in the process of birth and death, people would not age, die, or fall from kingship to commoners or prisoners. These all indicate the changing conditions. The Buddha explained that human consciousness similarly changes. When the eye contacts colors, shapes, sizes, or forms, the sense organ responsible for perception is called eye consciousness, i.e. the perception of the eye. Similarly, ear consciousness arises from sound. Other senses and their objects have equivalent values. Thus, humans have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness, and so on. Imagine a house with 5 windows and 1 main door. At night, lighting a candle or torch would instantly illuminate the exterior through the main door and the 5 windows. People might say, this is the light from the main door, the left window, the right window, the inner door, the outer window, and so forth. This is not wrong, but essentially there is only one candle or torch inside. In other words, the Buddha used this metaphor to demonstrate, when we speak of eye consciousness, it does not mean it has an independent consciousness separate from ear consciousness. Similarly, with body consciousness, mind consciousness, etc., there is only one overall consciousness with different functions related to the senses that humans and animals possess. Each animal has varying sensory sensitivities. Humans can develop sensory perception through eyes and ears, then use these senses in educational processes related to labor, communication, experience, and the continuation of skill seeds. Meanwhile, although animals may have superior sensory perceptions, they cannot create educational processes like humans. There are still limitations, whether it is the sensory perception of humans or animals. All share a single stream of consciousness manifested through the 6 sensory organs. Additionally, there are 2 more types of consciousness, the one that clings and leads to suffering, called manas consciousness, and the storehouse of all seeds accumulated over many lifetimes called alaya consciousness, or the storehouse of consciousness. This storehouse contains all the seeds of actions and attitudes humans experience over many lifetimes. It is a non-physical repository, a continuous stream of mind, present with humans and beings through the process of birth and death. The view of a long-lasting presence from one life to another differs between Brahmanism and Buddhism. The Buddha asserted that human consciousness depends on conditions. In contrast, Brahmanism maintains that it is fixed and immutable, unchangeable by human fate. Each sense organ has a distinct perception function. These functions support happiness, but also create trouble when the value of happiness exceeds its inherent demand. Consciousness is not an eternal reality, but a flow. The Mahayana tradition likens it to a waterfall, appearing as a plane or mass from afar but composed of countless atoms and molecules of H2O up close. Similarly, human physical structure and cognition are composite formations of many different conditions and factors. When senses malfunction like blindness, myopia, or hyperopia, the eye's perception diminishes. Other senses like hearing, smell, taste, touch, and mental state are similarly affected. Good senses lead to good perception. Perception quality also depends on surrounding conditions like light, distance, the inherent luminescence of objects, etc., establishing varied perceptions. One cannot say, there is an unchanging perception when light conditions change. The same object, like a yellow flower, appears less vibrant under neon light but shines vividly under incandescent light. In total darkness, the yellow exists but cannot create the perception of yellow. No one can see it. Thus, perception inherently changes depending on light conditions, angles, viewpoints, sense quality, health, etc. Understanding perception as a flow allows people to believe that life can be renewed. Renewal occurs in 2 directions, negative and positive. Positive perceptions lead to positive outcomes, and negative perceptions lead to negative outcomes. Therefore, one should not rely on past achievements. To ensure a good future, constant effort is needed in the present. Moral and cognitive decline can occur, and human talents can fade. Vietnam has a saying, Old age depletes talent. As one ages, adaptability to the environment and new inventions slows. Old knowledge becomes a clinging block, making it difficult to accept new, differing traditions. They become outdated, losing the ability to embrace better, higher values. The Buddha's analysis of the process from ordinary perception to enlightened life is a flow dependent entirely on mental perception. By stating the nature of perception and consciousness as non-fixed, the Buddha aimed to transform ordinary human perception into the enlightened wisdom of saints. This is the essence of his teachings. He did not create ordinary philosophical doctrines for commentary, evaluation, comparison, and debate. His doctrine dismantles all human attachments. It may be viewed as a philosophical tradition, but its essence is transformative philosophy. From this perspective, one can remain calm amid others' labels, judgments, and misrepresentations. People can have various ways to perceive, but the essence of the perceived remains one. Perception and the content of the perceived can differ entirely. Therefore, do not be afraid of being mislabeled or misrepresented. There's no need to justify unless there are conditions and requests for clarification. The accuracy of the explanation depends on the listener. Matter in mind, the Buddha asked Bhikkhu Sati and the attendees, "Can you see the objects happening right before your eyes? For instance, an animal walking, standing, lying, or sitting?" Everyone replied yes. The Buddha further affirmed, living beings, including humans, sustain their lives based on conditions, particularly food. Without food, human life can only extend for a few years or months at most. The formation of human life relies on food. There are two types of life: physical life and mental life. Similarly, there are two types of food: physical food and mental food. Physical life. This relates to the body's structure, which is made up of four elements: solids, liquids, air, and energy, known as the four great elements: earth, water, wind, fire. Physical life and its longevity depend on food, meals, drinks, and other nutrients related to this food. Meanwhile, mental life, which is equally important, is often neglected. Mental life. This includes emotions, cognition, conceptualization, spirituality, ethics, ideas, arts, etc. Its food consists of things related to the mind. Mental and physical life intertwine like a light bulb and electricity. Separating electricity from the light bulb leaves the electricity present, but its effect is minimal. If the switch or filament is broken, electricity still flows, but no light emanates. Similarly, for the perception of electricity and light to be present, the physical body, like the light bulb, and its directly related factors must be in good condition. This understanding allows one to avoid extreme materialism or idealism. Both are extreme if seen as the sole origin of all phenomena. Believing that matter is the origin of all phenomena overly elevates the role of matter, leading to a lifestyle focused on enjoyment, viewing material wealth, money, and career as everything. However, happiness's essence lies in the stream of emotions. Matter is merely a condition, a means. Conversely, believing that mind is everything falls into the opposite extreme. Buddhist philosophy does not endorse idealism as some might claim. The Buddha taught dependent origination, focusing on conditions, mutual interdependence without an initial cause, whether mind or matter. Viewing things as either idealism or materialism is a misconception, separating phenomena from their interactions. The Buddha said, "When ordinary perception recognizes the process of conditions, one can live comfortably." The Buddha mentioned, wisdom begins with transforming a doubtful mind. Doubt creates fear, leading to unnecessary security measures, restrictions, regulations, and ways to protect life. This can result in opposition, exclusion, and conflicts. All of these stem from psychological doubt about oneself, others, religion, philosophy, and the nature of life. Doubt is a psychological force that binds, akin to tying a person up and throwing them into a river, telling them to swim to shore. How can one move forward? Therefore, doubt immobilizes people, trapping them in the conservative cycle of a particular viewpoint. Those filled with doubt struggle to practice, and the suffering they experience gets nurtured and protected, making happiness seem far away. Doubt's offspring is hesitation, leading to indecisiveness in any viewpoint. This standing still causes people to miss opportunities to encounter better things. Once doubt is transformed, wisdom starts to sprout and grow. A person with clear perception has firm faith in their happiness, without longing for what they do not have. If one longs with a doubtful attitude, the potential and conditions sufficient for happiness might be overlooked, thinking happiness lies somewhere else, in a new job, or relying on others. This causes them to abandon their strengths and chase after weaknesses, a significant mistake stemming from doubt. One must affirm what they have and utilize those to benefit themselves. Post-1975, many Vietnamese boat people sought a promised land. Arriving in new countries, they had no choices and had to build a career from scratch with all their positive efforts. Eventually, after 10 or 20 years, they established prosperous lives, some even more successful than locals. This is commendable because they had only one path forward. Even if it was a towering mountain, retreating would mean falling into an abyss. Climbing may risk falls, but with skill and method, they could reach the peak. Guided by the light of Buddhism, many Buddhists succeeded despite past pains and the haunting memories imposed by political and social conditions. Subsequently, many Vietnamese also sought similar happiness. They emigrated through marriage, labor cooperation, or other means. Some succeeded, but many failed. Some had wealth and jobs in Vietnam but left everything, thinking countries like the USA, France, Canada, Australia were paradises. Upon arrival, they adapted slowly. Being affluent people used to comfort. Ultimately, suffering overwhelmed them whenever they recalled what they had. Returning to Vietnam would be shameful. Because of pride, they buried their lives. Here it is emphasized, resoluteness without wavering, avoiding the grass is greener on the other side mindset, helps people become clear-minded, unaffected by external influences, to move forward effectively. The Buddha reminded, to avoid clinging to truths, recall the parable of the raft taught in the 22nd Sutta, the snake catcher. The essence of the Dharma is to overcome suffering, not to be worshipped and held onto. Similarly, the image of the raft helps cross the river. If after crossing, one does not step ashore but continues drifting with the raft, happiness cannot be guaranteed. Worshipping the raft by carrying it on one's shoulders or head is meaningless and negatively impacts those needing the raft to cross. In other words, do not worship scriptures on the altar. Practice their values in life. The beginning of wisdom comes from affirming the mind on the foundation of cause and effect, perception, understanding, and experience. The Buddha emphasized, the nature of wisdom is to create purity, joy, and happiness. It is a mistake to desire ownership of spiritual values achieved. Spiritual essence is communal. The path to liberation and joy is communal. Never possess it for a sect, temple, family, or oneself. Those who wish to own the truth will suffer. Pride and arrogance arise from such possession. The nature of Buddhist practice is to transform the corners and thorns of the ego, including pride, shame, inferiority complex, hesitation, suspicion, fear, dogmatism, and authoritarianism. Believing oneself to be the pinnacle of truth, with everything and everyone else subordinate, creates egoistic thorns. Clinging to and boasting about truth leads to similar pride. My practice is correct, others are wrong. My path is the best, others are flawed. This alienates fellow practitioners who share the same spiritual teacher, the Buddha. Fortunately, in Buddhist tradition, though there are many schools and practices, practitioners have never seen each other as enemies, nor claim to be the sole truth. Food for samsara. The Buddha's teachings describe how to stop providing sustenance for the cycle of samsara in life. There are 4 types of nourishment considered essential for the sustenance of birth and death, the sustenance of suffering. They serve as the data foundation helping beings grow when present. They are the necessary elements and conditions to help beings come into existence after passing away in a certain realm or form of life. 1. Physical food, kabalinkaro aharo. This is food ingested through the mouth and the physical body in general. For instance, eating, intravenous fluids, injecting nutrients into the body, etc., are all considered physical food. The concept of physical food originates from Indian culture, where people traditionally eat with their hands, not using chopsticks or spoons. To make food easier to consume without mess, they often mix the food and then use their hands to form it into balls before eating. The essence of physical food helps people grow and develop. Where food is scarce, malnutrition, reduced life expectancy, and increased disease are prevalent. Thus, taking care of human longevity starts with caring for their food intake. Knowing how to use the necessary food for life helps reduce consumerism that affects physical, intellectual, and mental health. The Buddha said, "Simply by regulating one's eating habits, people can reduce many illnesses significantly." Anyone who has been ill can relate to this. Doctors and pharmacists often prescribe dietary regimes according to the patient's condition to reduce, control, and confine the illness. The nature of physical food is to create health, extending lifespan. 2. Contact food, fasaharo. Contact food is nourishment obtained through the senses' interaction with their objects. Although it doesn't prolong life like physical food, it enhances life's values, adding enjoyment, such as the need for entertainment. Watching movies is contact food for the eyes. Traveling and sightseeing also fall under contact food. Contact food can be likened to spices and seasonings. The most important and hazardous to the process of birth and death is the conjugal life, where contact food serves as nourishment. Without this type of food, marital happiness may collapse because its nature creates habits and addictions. Those who invest in or depend too much on the contact food related to senses and their objects become slaves to habits, constraints, and entanglements they cannot break free from. Number 3. Volitional food, menosans tanaharo. Volitional food relates to willpower, intention, and thoughts of a person, acting as nourishment that prolongs human life and longevity. Willpower can extend life. For example, a bedridden patient may live longer if there is an unfinished event or task they long to complete. Similarly, the love and concern for a young child can help a patient extend their life for several months. When the intrinsic value of life ends, the nature of clinging to willpower and desires can prolong life for a short while. Understanding this psychological principle, to depart peacefully, practitioners and those controlled by illness should let go of it artfully and without regret.